Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dojo Live. This is Tulio Sergusa broadcasting from Southern California, and joining me today is Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico.
Hi.
And our guest is Tom Kieley, who's the co-founder and CEO at SourceDay. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
Kieley. Tom Kieley.
Yeah, Tom Kieley. Common mistake. Every graduation I've had.
Late to the pre-show prep. Okay. So we're going to talk about supply chain today, and interesting topic. But before we go into it, let's get to know our guests a little bit. So Tom Kieley, if you could please tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk about SourceDay a little bit. But first, let's get to know you. Welcome to the show again.
Yeah, thank you. So coming in live from Austin, Texas. Been here most of my life since 1989. Born and raised in Texas, so I'm a native Texan and one of the few mostly native Austinites that remain with the growth we're seeing here. But long story short, I've always been kind of a creative engineering mind, trying to solve problems most of my life. And I graduated from Texas A&M with a degree in engineering around supply chain and industrial distribution, logistics. So all around manufacturing, distribution, logistics, and was always kind of infatuated with technology as well, having many internships and starting my career kind of learning how to build computers in the 90s. And then fast forward, found my way at Dell working in manufacturing. I actually managed a second shift of boxing in their facility in Round Rock, Texas, and kind of hit the ground running with managing a team of 30 to 60 people, depending on the scale and size of the year, and really learned a lot about the manufacturing processes and Six Sigma and Lean, and really understanding real world, the day-to-day of, even some of the pieces at the size of Dell at the time where, suppliers could really prevent shipments and revenue and the like. So long story, I left my career at Dell and started my first software company called RightGift in 2008. I bootstrapped that business and in and around kind of the gift giving and charitable giving space, and sunset that to a new owner now, and have met my co-founder, which led me to creating SourceDay with him, Clint McCree, in 2013, and we launched that platform in 2015 from his background in manufacturing and mine as well.
Very cool. You brought me back to 1998 with Lean Six Sigma. The company I was with, we had a deal with GE Power Systems, so that forced us right into the Six Sigma world. So interesting.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's talk about SourceDay. You co-founded this company. There must have been, throughout your years and experience in that space, there must have been something that was like, we should do this, and this is why we should do it. Tell us about it, please.
Yeah, absolutely. My first company, RightGift, was really what led my co-founder and I to start talking about entrepreneurship and enterprise software. He and I were both enterprise software sellers at the time, selling middleware integration software in layman's terms. And both of us really had always had this drive to be entrepreneurs and to create. So he had a vision early on to create kind of a marketplace for IT procurement and procurement of any type of materials as well. And so we kind of took the bones of RightGift and created the LLC in 2013 and came together to use the same team that I had around RightGift to build and create and bootstrap SourceDay. And kind of twisting and turning and pivoting like most startups and co-founders do. 2.5 years later, we turned and twisted into what became SourceDay ultimately, which has launched in mid-year 2015 as a supply chain procurement collaboration platform, which is a lot of buzzwords. And nowadays, everyone's talking about supply chain. If you're not talking about it, and if you're not hearing about it, you're probably under a rock somewhere. And you're also not being impacted by it, which the world is, as we know. So everyone likes to joke about overnight successes. When our first 5 years of SourceDay, nobody was talking about supply chain. We were creating a category. We were in kind of a world of our own. that really was a bolt-on to all of the ERP systems that you can think of. So SAP, Oracle, NetSuite, Epicor, Infor, Microsoft. You think about all those big enterprise platforms. They manage all the procurement of materials for manufacturers, distributors, direct-to-consumer retailers, to make sure that parts and pieces and finished goods are where they need to be when they need to be there. The challenge is those parts and pieces typically end up in Excel sheets and emails, and orders go missing, and you typically end up with empty shelves or empty supply chain lines or empty shop floors where everyone's wondering, where are my parts? So then you end up chasing your suppliers down with phone and email, fax, texts, you name it. So we created a ERP agnostic network, or a marketplace, if you will, where we're reading and writing data in and out of those procurement engines, the ERPs of the world, in real time, and driving workflows and automation so that suppliers and buyers are continually on the same page of what parts are going to show up, when are they going to show up, what's not going to show up, more importantly, in today's world, what's going to be delayed, late, etc. So it gives the buying organizations, the manufacturers of the world, the retailers, the distributors of the world, the ability to be proactive where items are going to cause pain that ultimately lead to lost customers, empty shelves, missing revenue targets, or worst case, overnight, such as we saw Peloton do for $100 million, air freighting bikes and treadmills from overseas to keep up with demand. Those issues come about because of gaps and lack of visibility and collaboration in the procurement process.
All right. Thanks for sharing that with us. Let's see what else we can learn. Let's dig in a little deeper. Kim will introduce the topic and see what we're going to learn today. Please, if you don't mind.
For sure. Thank you, Tulio, and thank you, Tom. The topic is chosen by you today, Tom, is overcoming supply chain disruption with first mile technology. And more specifically, how automating PO line or purchase order line changes can help companies reduce late shipments, inventory carrying costs, pricing discrepancies, and out of stock issues. So I think we already talked to that a bit at the high level. My first question for you is this term, not so much the supply chain disruption, so much as first mile tech. What is first mile technology?
That's a great question. We coined that phrase, as far as we can tell, about 2 years ago, really at the start of the pandemic. And if again, you're watching the news, or if you're waiting on anything that you've ordered from any retailer, e-commerce, or storefront brand, etc., you're constantly hearing about last mile. You're hearing about the ocean freight and the carriers, and long lead times and the cost of a container. You're hearing about all of those constraints. Those are all really last mile. That's when the finished good or the parts are being shipped to either a end user, customer, business, consumer, or even to a manufacturer so that they can finish final assembly. What's never really talked about until recently, which is why SourceDay exists, is that first mile, which is really the process of everything that happens before a shipment. Which really, in my terms, and when I speak to customers and executives and analysts around the world, it's really about that point from when you cut the purchase order, which typically happens by a machine-generated purchase order, which would have parts and pieces and finished goods on it that you need to fulfill customer orders. That's based off of lead times, inventory levels, bill of materials, suppliers, etc. All of those inputs are pretty fixed in most cases. What's not fixed is the changes that happen from when you cut that purchase order to when the supplier can physically ship that good. And that's where we've seen over a 52% change in purchase orders in real time down to the line level that are happening, meaning the supplier is shipping later, they're splitting the line, short shipping it, so they're going to ship half now, a quarter later, and another quarter in 6 weeks. All of these disruptions in volatility are impacting the manufacturer, distributor, retailer's ability to meet demand. And having visibility to those disruptions from when the PO is cut to when it gets shipped gives you, as the manufacturer, distributor, the ability to impact change proactively. So if before you throw something onto ocean freight, after it's already been late, because that's your standard mode of shipping, you might call that supplier and say, hey, I know you're 6 weeks behind. Let's go ahead and air freight half that order so we can get ahead of some orders. Or, let's shift that demand from an overseas supplier to a more nearshore or domestic supplier. So you have an ability in real time to change the outcome before something gets onto a mode of transportation, which at that point you can't make the shipment from ocean freight or air or truck go any faster than what it can go. So you've got a fixed outcome. So again, that first mile is from purchase order creation, even really lead time adjustments and dynamic lead time changes based on real data from our platform, gives customers, large and small, that use our platform to really impact change and really end with a better last mile outcome.
So Tom, I'm curious to see if we can kind of paint the picture a little bit of what it's like today and what that looks like with SourceDay. So what I've heard so far is once it's shipped, it's got its own challenges, its own circumstances, right? But before it ships out, someone submits a purchase order. Whether you have the parts or an inventory, that can delay how fast you fulfill that purchase order. Changes to that purchase order after it's already been placed can certainly delay getting things out. So can you maybe paint the picture of what it looks like today and the impact that has on businesses and how SourceDay fixes that through automation?
Yeah, absolutely. And for those in the audience that are familiar with manufacturing or any consumer product good, what often happens most is in the receiving dock or at your distribution centers or in your end customer, you'll typically find out, the day that it's supposed to arrive, that something has happened upstream that really prevented any ability of that ever happening in reality. And, so in today's world, a purchase order may get cut. It might have 100 line items on it with 100 different parts, and then there's probably 100 more purchase orders to 100 different suppliers. Each one of those is critical to meeting the finished product delivery to a customer. And it may be kitting, it may be manufacturing, it may be distribution of multiple products, but the visibility that happens or lack thereof on what true and accurate lead times are, meaning when you place an order, your system may believe that there's a 6-week lead time, but because of disruption and volatility, you have thousands of SKUs, those lead times have drastically changed from all the disruption. Those lead times typically don't get updated. So, having visibility to real-time changes in what the outcome is going to be of every PO, SKU, line item, part number to when it's going to get fulfilled enables customers to really be able to predict and plan and prepare for how they need to impact the outcome, whether it's freight changes, supplier changes, multi-sourcing of parts, whatever it may need to be. But to your point, if you're a consumer of any electronic component right now, there's shortages that we all know of that are across the board with chipsets and anything consumer electronic component wise. That is really driven from a influx in kind of artificial demand. Companies are overbuying in inventory like 3 to 4x levels that we've ever seen historically. I'm hearing from some of our small and large customers that in order for them to make sure that they can keep up with the long lead times, the delays in shipments, the delays in inbound shipment, they're just simply overbuying. So it's creating that superficial demand where there's not enough supply to keep up with it. So to combat that, you need to have greater connectivity and visibility and real-time collaboration with your suppliers so that you can actually order just-in-time demand that you need to fill your customers' orders. So it's across the board, from retail stores all the way through to anything that you're having fulfilled from e-commerce.
Who would have thought that a COVID toilet paper scenario would overflow into microchips?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with this, I'm alerted in real time, like great or not so great. Guess what? The shipment's been delayed. It's not going to get here on Thursday. It's actually going to get here on Tuesday or whatever that might be. What's next? So you here with SourceDay are telling me there's a problem, and that's an amazing alert. So I can be much more proactive than I would have been otherwise. Is there any other type of automation or suggestions that help within this tool to, great, there's a problem, how do I solve it? Or is that what's coming next?
Yeah, so there is a little bit of that, and we do have some coming next, predictability, that I can get into as well. But the real time today is most of our customers in pre-SourceDay world, and companies that I speak to that are looking at adopting SourceDay or similar technology, they really end up, the supplier will call, or the buyer will call the supplier the day it's supposed to be due, and say, hey, where's my part? And the supplier will typically say, oh, it's going to be 6 weeks late. It's going to be 12 weeks late. And that is kind of the current status quo. And it's really, quite honestly, it's been that way since pre-COVID. There's really just been high lack of visibility and a high lack of connectivity with your suppliers. They're outside your four walls, but you rely on them to do business. You must have them deliver on time and in full for you to meet your revenue targets and protect your gross margins and cash flows. Where companies get caught is they will overbuy an inventory to protect their downside of missing revenue targets, missing shipments, and that drastically impacts your cash flows.
Of course.
So that limits your ability to invest in automation technology. So where we're going, and SourceDay drives a lot of automation workflows that starts to show you items that are going to become a problem well in advance of them being a problem. So
right.
It's really about visibility. So if you have tens of thousands of PO lines open at any given moment, or even thousands, it's hard to understand which ones of those are going to be a problem. So SourceDay's entire automation platform starts to use analytics and predictivity, predictable insights to show, what are the components and parts from what suppliers that are going to, more often than not, be a challenge to on-time delivery. So that is here and coming in greater detail today,
right.
where SourceDay will begin to show predictable insights into what's going to create a problem down to the component in a specific time of the year at a specific region.
Wow. That's great. And so what I'm understanding here is there's always going to be this sensation of one step forward, 2 steps back. But now with SourceDay, instead of 2 steps back, maybe it's just 1 step back, which isn't, maybe there's always going to be problems, right? You're never going to have the ideal situation, but certainly 1 step back is a lot better than 2. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
Is this also giving me insight into the suppliers that I can rely on? I mean, maybe previous to your technology, it's just sort of going with my gut. I like these guys. They seem to be good at what they're doing. But now I'm going to have the data to say, these are the great ones. These are the so-sos. And you know what? Let's just stop doing business with this company altogether.
That couldn't be more true. And the theory and the practice behind subjective supplier performance reviews, whether you're doing an ISO audit or whether you're just doing a quarterly or annual business review with your suppliers, which all organizations should be doing by just best practice. The challenge with those is if you're living in Excel and email and manual processes, you really don't have any objective data to show suppliers the impact, other than some maybe one-off scenarios where
I think I remember that one time back then this happened. Yeah.
Right. And so, and maybe it's you're doing business with a buddy or with a relative, and, you're going to give that supplier a bit of a break over another supplier. And those, quite honestly, are very real stories. And we see them every week and every day. The point of which an organization needs to become more prescriptive is, how can I hold my suppliers and my buying organization accountable to very objective data? So real-time transactional data that's happening in a platform that you can then use to have very prescriptive conversations around where and when and what scenario did a supplier impact us from missing a very specific revenue target, and how often is that recurring, and is there some kind of a recurring theme across a part or a supplier or a region. And SourceDay provides analytics and insights using a piece of our platform called SourceDay Insights that really shows global look at every supplier and every component finished good that you buy from every supplier, where the performance was above or below an industry average. And we benchmark our customers' data in aggregate across every customer. So you can actually see how your organization is performing down to a part and component and a SKU against others in the same network.
So let's see if I can get some clarification around that, Tom. Most companies will have pre-negotiated suppliers that they have agreed to work with. What I'm hearing, though, is your platform allows the customer to be able to see how those suppliers are performing against other suppliers in that space, does it also give them access to dynamically switch or change? How does that work? Like, do you make recommendations on possible changes? Do you have those large networks of suppliers ready to do business? How does that work in terms of enabling, better inventory levels and perhaps even dynamics inventory abilities?
Yeah, you hit one of my favorite topics, and the moonshot idea behind SourceDay really from day one was to build that marketplace concept, right? So if you think about the data, we've processed something close to $200 billion of parts procurement in the last 5 years, and growing rapidly through that number as we scale. SourceDay grew over 65% year over year last year, and targeting closer to 80-90% this year. So with that comes a massive amount of transactional data. We obviously don't use customer or supplier data in kind of an identifiable way, but we do have the ability to use it in aggregate. So to start to be able to show trends and outlooks down to a component or a commodity where we might see a shortage coming, or we might be able to see an increase or a spike in demand where there's a shortage, or vice versa. So, very aggregate type, granular, industry specific and commodity specific data. But taking that a level further, really to our moonshot, and this is where SourceDay is going in 2023, due to the scale we've built on the supplier side of our organization, our platform, has given us the ability to open up next year a SourceDay marketplace for direct materials. So those suppliers that choose to will be able to opt in to enable SourceDay to do a matching, right? So using our request for quote platform that we do have available today, SourceDay RFQ enables customers today to go and submit quotes out to known suppliers. So they'll go submit, say, 10 commodity parts that they want to go get quotes back from 100 suppliers. As a part of normal business, customers should be doing that regularly to make sure that suppliers are keeping up to date with prices and lead times and price breaks and quality, et cetera. Our platform next year will enable those suppliers wanting to opt into that matchmaking component, where we'll actually be able to say, here's 5 suppliers that can meet 80 to 100% of your demand in a more regional specific or higher grade based on-time delivery, price part variance, quality, responsiveness, their ability to meet your demand specifically to that level of forecast. So that becomes a very sophisticated matchmaking tool, one that's very unique to the industry, that is specific for direct material parts.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It really seems like a win-win situation. Like on the sales side. Oh, sorry, Tulio.
I was going to say, I promise that was not intended to be a layup question. I was just, but I'm glad to hear you guys are planning that, because I think there's been organizations that have been probably wanting that for a long time.
For sure. And it's a win-win,
Yeah.
Right? Like both for the supplier to open up their sales opportunities and for the consumer to be made aware of a supplier that they perhaps didn't even know existed, and get the best of both worlds and increase that customer experience for sure.
Yeah, I think it can create a certain level of anxiety, right? Because it's really going to be kind of the truth teller of where price points need to be, where lead times really truly are, and holding suppliers accountable to a higher level. But the benefits, I believe, outweigh. If you're a poor performing supplier, that should be something you should want to fix, right? And you should want to have visibility to that. So our platform gives the supplier users that don't pay to use SourceDay, it gives their organizations visibility into how they're treating all and maybe even some of their largest customers that are using SourceDay, down to on-time delivery and responsiveness. And so it really becomes, a scorecard of maybe even the user on the supplier side that, is, fulfilling the customer's orders. And that seems really scary, right? It's, when Salesforce came out, I was in sales, and I was told to adopt Salesforce, and I said, I don't want you to have visibility to the opportunities I'm working, and then start to grade me on what I'm doing well and not doing well. But the reality is, you need that, because then you can have people help you do better and have visibility to where gaps are. So the same is true for supply chain.
To start asking the right questions, right? Wait, how is it possible that they're making this happen and we're not? Yeah.
But it's also honest thing, right? I mean, let's face it. They are on the table dealings that happen sometimes. I mean, there's issues like that, and having a marketplace where it's fair play and the systems can dynamically make recommendations eliminates some of those things that cause problems for organizations who are trying to maintain compliance standard, et cetera. So it looks like something that's dearly needed. So the time frame is next year for that. Did we hear that correctly?
It is, and but I'll tell you now, we have a Fortune 100 customer using SourceDay today to do exactly what you just said, which is to eliminate the under the table kind of dealings that happen around price fixing. Right. So they're using SourceDay today to submit RFQs to all of their known approved suppliers, where they've already got contracts with them, but they can source the same part from, say, 5 different suppliers. But their current purchase order, the supplier they cut it to, can't meet that demand. They'll go out to our RFQ module, they'll submit it to the 5 suppliers, and then they'll find the one that's going to do the best for them in that moment. So that's happening today, and our customers are using that in real time.
Yeah.
Nice.
And what is the best? What do I need right now? Do I need speed? Do I need price? Do I need quality? Yeah.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Yes. Let's do it all.
Yeah.
All of the above.
So I cannot believe time flies when you're having fun. We are actually to the final minutes of today's show, if you can believe it or not. And we would be amiss without going back to the heart of SourceDay. I know that this was something that you co-founded and is very dear to your heart, and to solve a real problem that you saw. What is it like? What is your company culture that you've built? What is it like to work at SourceDay? And why might someone want to come work with you?
No, absolutely. True story, and probably a lot of founders say things like this, but my co-founder and I wrote, value-driven technology and culture on a whiteboard the first day we started brainstorming the company. And it came from being at companies in our history that didn't have the best culture, the most well-rounded culture. And so we've kept that near and dear. And for us, culture is the people, the fabric that make up the company, right? Clint and I didn't build SourceDay. The SourceDay team members built SourceDay, and each one of them, is here because they want to be disruptive. They want to go fast. I encourage every new employee to break something that we're doing today in the company, that to a point where they can improve it or figure out if we're doing it best already. And it always breaks something that we can fix. But I'm always challenging them. If we're not breaking something, then we're really not trying to improve or disrupt and get better. So the culture we have is, work hard, play hard. It's not ping pong tables and, happy hours. Of course, every company should do those things to really create a bond. But it's really about celebrating your wins, learning from losses, and really, we're a collaboration platform, and our company culture is about collaborating to solve problems internally, just as much as we create that for our customers. So again, it's, you got to have a lot of grit and grind and all those startup buzzwords. Those are given, but it's really, you want to be a disruptor. You're not afraid to break something. You're not afraid to, have peer-to-peer accountability and tell someone, hey, you can be doing something a little better. But doing it in a humble and passionate way. And then the most important piece of our culture is, taking care of our team members first as a team and as a family. And then that will always inherently take care of our customers. And then the rest will really fall in place.
I love it. Thank you. Grit. The Texas way, bootstrap, grit, grind, break it, fix it.
You got it all.
Very great. Thank you.
Well,
thank you.
Great to have you with us, Tom. We're out of time. We could talk a lot more. It's very interesting, everything we've learned from you today. And it seems as though you guys are also moving in a direction that's really going to help manufacturers and suppliers to button up their processes and their inventory and supply, and just better serve their end customers. Nothing worse than making a prediction you're going to get some by a certain day, and then a month later you're still waiting. That's just not how to run business. So seems like people need this. We encourage you to check it out. And sourceday.com, is that the URL?
That's correct.
Awesome.
Or follow us on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us. Stay with us as we go off the air in just a second. Kim, we got one more show, right? Tomorrow?
We sure do. We do. We have one more show tomorrow afternoon, also 12 o'clock Pacific. We'll be speaking with Michael McCarthy, who's the CEO at Inkit. And the topic is sensitive data meets document streaming, a new technology for enterprise businesses, and really looking at answering the question of data at rest is data at risk. But what does that mean for companies? Right, so catch it tomorrow, Dojo Live, 12 o'clock Pacific. See you then. Thank you, Tom.